Faith Forged in Fire, where we dive headfirst into the unique challenges and triumphs that comes with being a firefighter, all while exploring what it means to live out a biblical worldview. Join us as we find hope, perseverance, and faith in the midst of the heat and chaos. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the podcast, as you've already been welcomed. We have a special one, at least special for me, for you today. This is really going to be the one that's going to show you the heart of why we're doing what we're doing. If you haven't heard our first one, go back and listen. And it's not the first in the whole entire series, because Faith Forged in Fire was started by Jason Sawtell and myself, and then we took a hiatus of quite a little while, and now we're here with Chief Rich Hayes.
Still not used to hearing that.
So if you want to find out a little more about us, go listen to the first podcast that we did together, which is the one just before this one. But I'm excited about this one because let me kind of break into it this way, share it this way. So the way we got to be friends with Jason was really because of his book, Faith Forged in Fire, The Rescuer. So I'm not going to take for granted that people listening all know who Jason is. I just assumed that a lot because of our previous podcast. But so Jason Sawtell, Oakland firefighter, he wrote this book that you just have to read, because I'm not going to tell the whole story, right?
World-renowned surfer, super cool dude.
Not like us. Not like us here in the Midwest.
Yeah. No, he lives for the big waves.
So anyways, I think I found the book and I read the jacket and I'm like, whoa, it's like a mirror image of your story.
Right, and they're supposed to, or we thought that there was going to be a questionnaire that came with it.
Study guide.
So it's study guide. And because you didn't get one, what did you do? You went right to the author. And
well, I didn't mean to. That's the funny part.
He's a lot nicer guy than what the photos make him out to be. So, no, and that's kind of how it all...
Yeah.
He started talking about what a nice guy he was, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, so we've both gotten to know him and enjoyed our time. So that's our plug for those of you who are on here and don't know Jason. Go find The Rescuer and read The Rescuer by Jason Sawtell. And if you listen to any of the other podcasts previous to this one, other than the very last one, you will hear him, as he and I started this podcast. So anyways... today is the day that we're going to kind of unpack your story. And this is really a first. This is something I've been waiting for a long time. This journey, so people kind of understand when I say a long time, we have been walking through this together for 4
or 5 years.
4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. So this is the first time we've sat down and done this recording.
It's never been recorded.
Right.
No.
So we are shooting for a half hour. We'll see. I'm not going to cut this short just because of time.
Right.
So what I want to do is say this. I want to start from my side, and then we'll kind of interject as we go along, because what I love about this is the way God worked in your heart, and he was working in my heart. I want people to hear this. Rich knows this. I mean, he hears me say this all the time. I was literally just a tool in all of this. He's the one that did the work. But when you hear what God was doing in my heart, that's just hear that he's the one that did it, but he was working in my heart to allow me to be a tool. So I joined your fire department many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that in the last podcast as a chaplain. Then I became a firefighter, and I knew, I got to be good friends with most of the guys on the department, very much, you guys became my brothers. When I moved up here from where we were, 15 minutes north, the hardest thing about moving was leaving, being actively involved in the fire department down there.
Yeah, you bailed on us.
I did. You can blame God for that one.
No, no, we're not going there. It was the plan, and it's worked out well. I mean, it's been a great opportunity for you to be here.
But when I left, I felt like there was unfinished business. I went to be a ministry, and I knew there was little things along the way, but I didn't see anything specific that I had seen God allow me to do. And that bothered me, but I knew it was his plan. So I had been up here, where I live now, and am a pastor for 2, 3, maybe 3 years, something like that.
Could be.
And we hadn't seen each other for a while. You came up when Benson was just born, and he's almost 8.
Mm-hmm.
So
I came up and took family photos once or twice. Yep.
And he was little. So that was probably the last time that I had seen you before this. Mm-hmm. So it might have been a year in between that we hadn't really even talked. But previous to this, previous to our next contact is what I'm saying, I was at a conference, and the Lord really convicted me that I needed to be praying for one person that I could be in a redemptive Bible study, one person that I could actively be pursuing for the sake of the gospel.
Didn't want to go for an easy one, huh?
That was up to him.
Challenge accepted.
I knew all these people, but I didn't have one that I was like, man, this is the person I'm really pursuing. And I started praying, and I prayed for probably a month, and I got our church people praying with me and said, hey, just pray. I really want to be active in living out the Great Commission. Matthew 28, 19 and 20, go into all the world and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So I wanted to be a part of that. There's a stat that says 95% of evangelical Christians have never led somebody to Christ outside of the local church. And I was that person. I had led people to Christ. Maybe they came for vacation Bible school. They came for Easter and they raised their hand or whatever it might be. And I had an opportunity to lead them to Christ. But I had never, as long as I'd been on the fire department, I had never had an opportunity to build a relationship or lead somebody to Christ. So I started praying. And I prayed for probably a month or so. And so this is etched. This is burned in my memory. I don't know if I'll ever forget it. I was sitting on the couch. I never sit on that couch. And I literally, I remember sitting there, and the phone went off, and it was a text, and I looked down, and it was you. And then I was like, I had to do a double take because, you can see the first couple words. And I opened it up, and it said, if I was to buy a Bible, which version would I buy?
Talk about a text out of the blue, huh?
Exactly. Well, because it was a text out of the blue, we'll back up, and we'll talk about why that was in a minute. I think I was white. Like I think the color drained out of me. It normally would not have been a big deal, but I had been praying for a month. Like, Lord, give me somebody. And then you text. You can't see it if you're listening, but in air quotes, out of the blue, right? Mm-hmm. It was not out of the blue. So I told you which version that I would buy, and then followed that up with, when you get it, would you like to do a Bible study? But you weren't so easy to say yes. You did say yes, but you had something else in the middle right there.
Mm-hmm.
A hobby of yours, which was...
maple syrup season. That's right. I was going like hobby. I have so many of them, but yeah, it was maple syrup season.
And at that time, you were big into maple syrup.
And I was busy.
And said, when the maple syrup's done, then we'll do it. Yep. So now I got to wait, right? And I'm just praying. And I told the church, hey, my buddy Rich said he'll do a Bible study with me, but it's after maple syrup season, so let's pray. So now the church is praying. And it got to the point where I was kind of afraid to text you because I was afraid you were going to change your mind and tell me no, and then I was going to be disappointed. But I couldn't, it went on so long, I couldn't go back to church and tell them I still hadn't asked you, because they were asking me, like, hey, Pastor, is Rich going to do a Bible study with you? Is Rich, because they've been praying and praying and praying. And so finally, that's what literally drove me to text you again and say, hey, are we on? Are we going to do this? So it was several weeks from the first text, and you said yes. And so we started into a Bible study. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna stop my part of the story there, back up a minute, and then you can add on, and then you can fill in your parts leading up to that. When you said it was a text out of the blue, you would have been one of the last people that I would have ever expected would have texted me and asked that question.
Right. How far back do you want me to go?
Oh, man. Let's go at least as far as just before I met you. Right? Like, that's kind of when things tumbled. We don't have to talk about details, but that was probably one of the worst summers of your life, right? I came on in June, just before probably one of the worst calls.
Yeah. It's hard to describe. What I tell a lot of people is like, well, today the class that I was in, the guy talked about balloons. He can hand you a little balloon, but you can't let it go. Can't touch the ground. And then he'll hand another balloon to you, and eventually what happens, the way I worded it is you've got a closet. And every medical call, when it's not necessarily if it's just your normal, run-of-the-mill, I've got high blood pressure call.
Right.
But something that involves injury or some sort of trauma.
Right.
You come home, and I say you throw a shoe in the closet.
Yep.
Now, it might be a size 5 shoe, or it may be a size 18 shoe.
Mm-hmm. But it's a shoe. Takes up space. Yep.
So every time you come home, you take a shoe and you throw it in the closet. Well, for quite a while, that closet will hold all those shoes. But then eventually one day you're going to open up that and you're going to throw, and it may be that size 18 shoe that you throw in there, or it might be just a size 5 shoe that you throw in there. And some stuff is going to start coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and can I just interject here, Rich? I don't want to interrupt you necessarily, but as just so people who are listening that don't understand the fire service, I kind of describe it this way. By God's grace, I've been able to walk through the things that you have in a different, because of Christ, but there's still shoes in the closet. Mm-hmm. So simple as I'm not very active on your department anymore. I live too far away. But to this day, if I'm driving, I might not even know. I might not even realize what road I'm on, and I'm just driving. We are in rural, so you're just tooling along, minding my own business, and all of a sudden I drive by a house. Didn't even know I was going to go by that house. And instantly, there's pictures. I know exactly what happened in that house. Mm-hmm. I can smell it. I can hear it. And it doesn't mean that it sits with me and bothers me even. It's just that there's shoes in the closet.
Yep, you remember them, and it's so weird because probably people that aren't police officers or in this type of business probably don't get that.
Right.
It might be comparable to like you're driving through your hometown and you go by your grandma's house that passed away 15 years ago. You remember grandma sitting there knitting, or the smell of grandma's cooking or whatever. And that kind of happens to us. I mean, sometimes you can go by a house and you don't remember it. The next time you go by, and like you're saying,
right,
you can almost remember their name. You can remember what happened, where they were.
I don't think we're designed to have to deal with the amount of trauma that we deal with. I don't think God necessarily designed us for that, and He has to walk us through that. I'll say one more thing to that line, and then we can kind of keep going. But what I've come to realize in my years as a firefighter is the stuff that's normal to us is not normal to other people. So people who are listening who don't necessarily understand it, they're not going to get it, right? Because I see people, we see the people, we go on a call that's nothing to us, and somebody's freaking out, and we're like, This is nothing. But it is. We just are so used to that stuff that it's not a big deal to us anymore. So point being, no matter what, there's shoes going in the closet. We're dealing with things, and it can pile up if we don't deal with it the right way.
And I had somebody ask me one time what makes the difference between a size 4 shoe and a size 18 shoe, and you don't know.
Never know.
You don't know. I was out on the expressway one time. I'd responded to a vehicle that rolled over, and in the opposite lane, there was carnage. Things happened, and I looked and was like, "Oh, gotta go. Got another one." Completely not paying attention. It was a focus, and just tunnel vision. I'm in the mode. You know what that is. I've got a patient. What's going on? What's my priority? Those things. I was happy. The door opened. I went, well, sweet. Not have to extricate. Extrication is fun, but, to a point. And the curtain airbag had pulled off. And so went off. So I pulled the curtain airbag up to see what's going on with my patient. And my daughter turns her head and looks me in the eyes.
Yep.
Size 18 shoe.
Right.
Yeah. And for other people, I've been to 10-year-olds that have fallen off from horses with compound fractures. It's like, okay, that's a 4.
Right.
And to some people, you'd be going like, ooh, and they don't
We're
get
thinking,
it. So,
that could have been a lot worse, so it's a 4. Right.
And I find that if you can relate your patient to somebody,
that's what makes it worse.
Yeah. Like even if it was one of your children, and I would go on a call, and one of the patients reminded me of your children, size 18 shoe. Right. It just makes it a little more personal, I guess.
Right.
We care for everybody the same, but
the way it sits, the way we carry it with us later.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So let's go back then. I think that's hopefully that gives people who do not understand as much what we deal with, that gives them a better understanding. So we go back to the summer many years ago now. And so I think at that point your closet was really filling up, but you were still doing the firefighter thing.
Right. And unfortunately, as a lot of people know that, and it's getting a lot better, thank God. A lot of people have that suck it up buttercup thing. You come back to the firehouse, you had to be tough. You couldn't let that bother you, because if you let it bother you and the other guys would see you, then wow, if he's that weak, I don't even want to go into a house fire with this guy if he can't stand that. Right. And that's really, the mental health and the emergency services has really taken a turn.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. Yes.
We're actually acknowledging that, hey,
it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah, we're killing ourselves faster than the actual duty is killing us. Right. So what had happened is, I'll say by chiefs. It was the second chief that I worked under. We got a new program at the station, and we were going to come in and learn how to use it. So don't remember what night it is. I'm guessing it was like a Tuesday night, but I don't remember exactly. We were going to meet, and I can, you talk about you're sitting on the couch on a Wednesday. It was May 17th, 2011. And we're getting ready for training, and we're just chit-chatting, just hanging out, just sitting down, starting to learn it, and the tones drop. So it came out, I want to say it was a 9-year-old child ran over by a lawnmower. So we're going like, okay, we're dealing with a broken foot, broken toe, those kind of things. When we arrived on scene, it was a whole lot different than what we'd expected. Right. And the child ended up passing away. The problem is the child reminded me of my daughter. Mm-hmm.
You guys can just know when you hear silence, this isn't easy for us to walk through. But we really want to be open, and so bear with us here. And I will say this too. I forgot to say this in the beginning, but if you haven't figured it out already, this is probably not the best episode to have your little ones listening to. We'll keep it clean, but it's obviously we're going to keep it clean. But we want to be open with this. So
we get done with the call. get back to the station, and it bothered. I mean, obviously, we bothered a bunch. After the call, there is what we call, everybody pronounces it different, so I'm just going to say it's critical incident stress management.
Right.
And it was kind of a mandatory thing that we had to go to. So
Been there.
after the call, and I don't know, it seems weird to me, but I have a ritual, and maybe other people can relate to this. But after a bad call, it's kind of like I went home, and it's like I took a shower. Mm-hmm. It's like I wanted to wash, and it wasn't because I got contaminated. It's not like that had happened. It's like I just want to wash the call away. Like baptism washes you from your sin. You know, I just go home and take a shower, clean up. If I'm going to cry, that's where I got to do it. But you got to get back in the game.
Right.
You know, there's a family there. These people depend on you. They love you. You've got kids that want you there.
And they have no idea what you just went through.
No, because once we got back to the station, I texted my wife, and I told her, hey, I had a bad call. You know,
Right.
So she knew that, hey, and I don't know exactly what she told the kids, but I'm sure it was like, hey, Dad had a bad call. He's probably not going to be in a good mood or not want to talk, whatever.
Right.
So that all went. And, you know, for the most part, things went okay for me for the next couple days. It's kind of like, yeah, that was a bad call. That was a really bad call. But it could have been a lot worse, you know, in these kind of things. But for the most part, I think what had happened is I threw the size 18 boots. It wasn't just a boot. It was two boots. Into the closet. And what I'd done is I'd hurried up and slammed the door, and I leaned up against it. Well, then we have to go to the critical incident stress management meeting. And I'm just thinking it's going to be like some dude like you. We're chit-chatting. It's going to be laid back. It's going to be cool. I walk through the door, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, the call taker at dispatch was there. Mm-hmm. The dispatcher that dispatched fire was there. The ALS people were there. The police were there. I mean, like, everybody was there. And part of it is we had to go around the table, and the dispatcher started. This is what I heard.
Right.
And it was like I was kind of listening to it all over again.
Yeah.
And it was tearing these people up. And I've got to say there was 20 people probably in that meeting. Yeah. And then there's police officers going like, oh, I've been a detective for 30 years, and that is by far the worst thing that I've ever been to. So after the meeting was over, I went home, and I felt really guilty. I'm like, dude, I mean, these guys are seasoned cops, and they're saying this is one of the worst things they've ever seen in their life, and you've been okay with that for 3 days? You know, are you sick? What's wrong with you?
By the way, if you come home from tough calls and you're okay with it, that's okay too, right? That's the grace of God, but that's just not the way you're taking this.
No, God wasn't in my life when that happened.
Right. I'll mention that a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit.
You know, so yeah, and then that's kind of where things got, you know, I started having nightmares. You know, the little girl would come back, and like one of the things during the call is I tried to find trauma dressing, and it wasn't where it normally is, meaning it probably was, it was in the rear compartment of the medic bag, but it was probably on the left side instead of the right side. Mm-hmm. Didn't make a difference in the medical outcome. Didn't change anything. It literally probably took me 2 seconds to find it additional, but I failed. Mm-hmm. I didn't know exactly where the address was. It delayed us 10 seconds.
None of which mattered.
I failed.
Right.
And so everything. So then I started having these dreams. This little girl is telling me, you know, you're a failure. Why don't you save me? I could hear Mom, which I don't even have to describe what that was like. So I just kept living it night after night after night and not getting any sleep. You know, so it
all well, as you said, this is before you knew the Lord. So you're doing this in a state of hopelessness anyways.
Right.
I mean, when I met you, we became pretty good buddies pretty quick. but you wanted nothing to do with the Lord. You didn't want to come to church. I remember asking you more than once, and you'd say, well, if I come to church, it's going to burn down. And I remember saying, like, well, if you're there, we got firefighters, we'll be all right, kind of thing. I remember walking into the station, like, for meetings and stuff, and there'd be a group of people, and they're talking, and you'd be in that group, and you'd see me, and the chaplain's coming, because you guys were talking about stuff that you knew I didn't want to hear. So this was, like I said, we were good. I think we were pretty good friends at that point, but she just wanted nothing to do with the Lord. From the outside, I could tell there were things going on, but you wouldn't let me in at that point at all.
I didn't let anybody in.
Right.
I mean, there was nobody. I wasn't talking to anybody about it. You would tell me about
your late night drives, and I'd say, hey, Rich, pick me up. Just call me anytime. Yep. I don't care what time. Yep. But you weren't letting anybody in.
No, because I didn't want to bother anybody.
Right.
My problem, and that's just kind of the avenue. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that really don't understand how much help there is out there. You just got to be able to ask for it.
Yep.
So that was a huge deal.
So we fast forward now a little bit. You're walking through this. You're not sleeping. And it's not just this. You've had all these other shoes ahead of time, and now you're putting more shoes in. As the shoes start to fall out, I think everybody can understand that that's kind of a bad thing. Let's, as much as you're comfortable sharing, let's walk through kind of, because when the shoes fall out, that means life's falling apart. Right. So let's walk through as comfortable as you are sharing kind of how your life fell apart at that point.
When you're that deep in the hole, it's so much easier to see the dark than it is any light. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything you do, something as simple as if you're drawing a picture with a pencil and you break the pencil lead, you can go like, dude, you're so worthless.
Right.
You can't even draw a picture without breaking a pencil lead, those kind of things. And when you get into that mental state, it's so easy to find negatives in everything. Everything that you do, you can find something wrong with it. If you dropped your keys, how many times have you dropped the keys coming to church? Oh, so what? You dropped your keys. But, it's like, oh, man, you idiot. You can't even hold on to your keys. You can just, it just starts.
That failure thing just won't leave.
Humbles.
Yep.
Plus, then you go home and you're trying to make sure that your wife thinks that you're okay. The kids are okay. They all depend on you. They all love you. You don't want to be the guy that you think you are,
right,
to them.
Nor to your brothers and sisters at the fire department. So you're living a double life too, because you're not wanting to just deal with it,
and there's no break from it. There's no break. You don't get a break from it, because then it's like finally you get to go to sleep, and then a random. And it wasn't just necessarily the girl that we lost at that accident. It was others, come through and like, oh man, if you would have done this, I'd still be alive. And it was just non-stop for a long time. Yep. So then, unfortunately, there's times where you want to live, but you don't want to deal with what you're going through.
The fight, kind of it's not worth the fight anymore. At least you're tired of the fight.
Yep, you're just exhausted. And I remember I was working, and it was in one of the bedrooms, and I was doing something as simple as replacing the cover around an electric outlet. That's not too difficult to do. You could probably teach a 5-year-old to do it. One screw holds it in there, and I remember I dropped the screw. And I went, dude, you're so worthless you can't even put an outlet cover on. And I remember that was like, I don't need to be here anymore. So, some people say it's the coward's way out, but, I decided that was it. I couldn't do it anymore. So one of the places I like to go just to kind of walk around and get peace was there's a dam just north of us a little ways, and or just south of us a little ways. So I was sitting there, boy, I don't know, 2:00 in the morning. It was crazy. And
hold on a minute, because people need to understand this. You said 2:00 in the morning, so let's make sure, because I know what's coming next, and I want them to hear God, because it was only God what happened next, because this was 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah, it was.
Middle of the night. Yeah, either way.
Yeah, right? I don't know exactly what time, but it was definitely
normal
dark.
People are not out of bed. Mostly.
Yeah, none of us people are normal. I don't know how to describe it so listeners could understand it, but where in this city, there's a small fire department kind of in town. The chief that I worked for at the time lived east of that station, and I don't know exactly how far. I'm going to guess 6 miles, maybe 5. And where I was at was probably about 4 city blocks to the west. So after she'd cleared a call in the middle of the night, she had absolutely no reason to go west. Not at that time of the night. There's just, why? I mean, it made no sense to go to the west, but they happened to. They happened to go west, and they happened to go right past the park where I was sitting. And how they saw me, I'll never know. But this
is not right by the road. This park is kind of down off.
Yeah, I was probably 50 to 75 yards off the side of the road. And it's in town, but it's not well lit. I mean, it's not like I was parked right out in the middle of the Walmart parking lot kind of deal.
Middle of the night.
Yep. So they're going, and they happened to see me. It was her and her husband, and they turned around, and she's like, she knew. Mm-hmm. She was on the call with me.
Right.
So she got out and came and sat in my car, and she started talking to me. And I'm not going to talk about what she said, because that's business between us. But what she was saying literally is almost exactly what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. And
at the time, maybe you're going to say this, but you've told me at the time you didn't know if she knew what you were doing there.
Oh, she had no clue. She had no idea what I was doing.
Okay.
And she might not until
now,
until she listens to this, So yeah, she just comes and sits in my car, bloop, sits down, and she starts talking. And the thing she was saying to me, I mean, I got angry. I mean, I was like, how dare you talk that way? Come on. What are you, stupid? There's so many people that love you. There's so many. But she's
saying exactly what you're thinking. It's okay for her. It's bad for her to think that way, but it was okay for you to think that way.
And it scared me. I mean, it was like God took the SD card out of my brain and plugged it into hers. She was saying things, and I'm like, dude, and I found that I was getting angry at her. It's like, dude, why? Why are you thinking that way? There's so many people that loved you. You've done so many good things. You've got so much to go for. And then she probably sat in the car and, I'll say talk, but it was counseled. We were just talking. We were there. We knew what each other had went through. And so she probably sat in the car for a half hour, 45 minutes, and it changed my view. It made things better. But, it didn't get me out of the dark.
Right.
But, yeah.
Now, I think you've told me, I think this is true. Maybe I've misheard the story. What I find interesting, if this is true, was she not sitting on a note?
Yeah, it was pretty much the goodbye letters to my
And she just
family.
got it and sat on it. And, this is how close we were. This is...
Yeah.
So I just, Ephesians 1:4, even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him in love. Like when I'm hearing this, and let's go back to, I didn't know all this happened. I do now, obviously, but I didn't. As our stories were merging, right, as our lives were coming together, even more so, I didn't know all the details. Mm-hmm. Now I look back and I see God's hand on your life, because if you would have followed through then, your eternity would be so different. And God was saying, I'm not done with you yet.
Right.
And so he used somebody else to make sure that you were still around for that day you text, right? And we started our Bible study.
Yep. Yeah, so that's, and and like when we started Bible study, one of the things that I was so hesitant about, and I had the Bible verse written down, but I don't remember what it was. We talked about it last week. I was hesitant to start Bible study because I was so broken. It's like God's not going to take me the way I am. I'm so broken. I better heal myself, and then, then I can, start doing that. And that was one of the conversations that you and I had. It was like, hey, if you break your leg, do you wait till it heals before you go to the hospital, or do you go to the hospital first?
Right.
And it's like, oh, come on, you're making so much sense, But yeah, so.
Well, yeah. So if we go to Matthew 9, Jesus talks about that, and he says, what do you need? If everybody's fine, we don't need doctors. Right. And what do we say? We run on people. They're thoroughly embarrassed and whatever and we're like, don't worry about it. It happens. This is why it's the same. It came to a place where for you, it was a matter of realizing I'm not going to heal my brokenness. God has to heal that brokenness.
Right.
As if we go back to the rescuer, right? You were in the boat of, as we all are. You needed to be rescued.
Right. Yep.
So as all of this kind of happens, and there's a lot more we could talk about, a lot more details. Life just kind of unraveled for you. And I didn't know all that stuff was happening. And then you just kind of, again, randomly, we know it wasn't randomly, when you text me, and we started a Bible study together. I was determined that I was not going to push you into a decision. I wasn't going to, I wanted the Lord to do it. It wasn't going to be me. I can't save you, right? But I had some idea what you had gone through. And then as we studied this, different things started kind of coming out and happening. I remember a couple of times you texted me and telling me, things that had happened, or things, and this is all stuff that had happened in the past, but it was still stuff that needed to be dealt with. And you being afraid that I was going to bail on you.
Oh, absolutely. Because I knew that I was a whole lot more to, you bit off a whole lot more than you wanted to chew. You just didn't know it.
I didn't know it, but that's okay, because we're all a mess. If it wasn't for Christ, we're all a mess.
Right.
So
and that was a point where there was so much that I couldn't hardly handle, to sit down with you one night and tell you the whole story. It had just been overwhelming for me. So it's kind of like I'd give you a potato chip and let you chew on it for a little bit, and then another one, unfortunately, and that was not the right way to get through the scenario, but it was kind of the only way that I really could.
Right.
To be able to handle it.
And it worked, right?
It did.
As far as, I mean,
you didn't bail on me, and now I'm a guest on your podcast. So.
I don't know about, you're a co-host now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Not a guest. So anyways, let's kind of go long story short. I wanted people to kind of hear you then through this, especially when we started meeting for Bible study. You were off the department then. At that point, you had enough.
Right. Yeah.
Shoes had fallen out. Life unraveled. You had enough of your own stuff to deal with.
Yeah, so I think, I don't remember my schedule, but I think the way my schedule then was Monday, I went to therapist for PTSD, and I did the EMDR therapy. I think that was Monday nights. And then I don't remember what night we did Bible study. Was it? Because I wasn't on the fire department. So we were doing Thursday night because I didn't have to be at the station, because that's the night of our trainings.
Right.
So it was therapy on Monday, hanging out with you on Thursday is what my life was for a year and a half, probably.
And now as we talk about this, I think you were off the department almost 2 years, because I think that's about how long. So when you came to take family pictures, you told me, I just remembered this, you told me you were going to quit. And literally within a week or two, you were done on the department. And that was a couple of years before
It may have been.
So it was probably a couple years that you were off the department, done, broken,
right.
Yep. So then we start studying the Bible together, and I remember one morning as I'm just walking through the plan of salvation with you in this Bible study, I remember waking up to a text that was probably the best news ever that I could have gotten.
Yeah. At that time in my life, I was living at my mom's house, and I woke up and it was definitely not cold in there, but I mean, I was cold and shaken and sweaty, and I knew it was time. So yeah, I prayed, and some people say they let God in, or they went to God, but God didn't go anywhere. He's been there.
He's been there.
Hello.
Yeah.
Open the door and let me in kind of situation. So, yeah, that night would have been in August. And, I asked the Lord to be my Savior, and He let me.
Yeah.
He
he
welcomed
was
me with
chasing
open
you
arms.
for a long time.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And then you waited for probably the coldest weather you could have without the water freezing, and we did the baptism in the creek.
There's still things that are, I'm still a firefighter at heart, and I got to, we can't just do things easy. We got to do something.
No, and the good thing is you were in the water with me. So,
right.
Yeah, you were, yep. But, yeah, and I remember that I felt, people just go like, oh, what is it like? And it's like I couldn't describe it, because I knew even though I was still a mess, I was going to be okay.
Right.
And one of the big helps is I had no idea people at this church had been praying and praying and praying for me. I mean, you go like, yeah, we're praying for you. But I was like, okay, people are praying for me. Great. Church, that's what churches do. They all get together and they pray for people. So you asked me to go like, hey, you got to come. So I came to Sunday church, and I walk in the door, and they're going like, hey, who are you? And I'm going like, I'm Rich. And I remember Pat goes, Rich. And he gave me a big old hug, and I'm like, wow. And other people are going like, oh my gosh, that's Rich. Oh my gosh, that's Rich. And I felt kind of like I was a celebrity. And then I really realized that all of those people had put in their own time praying for me just for that, just to help save me.
Paul, he talks about it, the Apostle Paul in the New Testament, he talks about laboring together with him in prayer. So for me, that was fun. I remember looking out. I remember seeing you walk in, because you said you were coming, so I was kind of anxiously waiting, hoping you would actually be here. So I saw you walk in, and then I thought, boy, I hope people welcome him well. And then I just saw these people giving you hugs, and I'm like, oh, I hope that doesn't scare him. But it was what it was, because they were invested in you. You didn't know that, but they were invested in you. And so Paul talks about this idea of laboring together in prayer. I was the one laboring on the front lines, so to speak. Right? I was the one on the nozzle. Let's come back to fire, right?
Yep.
I was the one on the nozzle, but they were the one running the pump. They were on water supply. They were all working behind the scenes in prayer. So when you came in, they understood they had a part in you being there through their prayer. And that's why that played out that way.
Right. And on my side, I just kind of thought, yeah, they're praying for me. But I didn't really realize, I don't think, of the scope of how these people were praying for me. I mean, when I walked through the door, I mean, it still seems weird to me, but I was an answered prayer for a lot of people.
Yep.
That's still hard for me to believe, why, people would pray for me to come to church. I mean, come on, but they did. They opened up like I was family, and I felt so welcomed coming in the door. And then little by little, I started learning that all of these people, they were taking time out of their own lives to pray for me. So it was amazing.
So let's fast forward this as we kind of get ready to land the plane. I knew we would go over our regular half hour here. Hopefully this has been helpful for people. But what I want people to hear and understand out of this is it's still not easy being a firefighter. It's not easy for either one of us to deal with the things that we deal with. But by God's grace, things are different for you now.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, back in in 2011, it was like, why would this happen?
Right.
Why would God let this happen? What kind of God would let this happen? And it's I don't even know how to describe it, but when you're in that mood, you don't look for God has a plan,
Right. No, you don't want to hear that.
No, it's like, yeah, really? Well, what kind of plan is that? Tell that to this little girl's parents kind of situation. But as you learn, it's not like you're buying a car and you know that you're going to make payments for 5 years. And when that 5 years is up, as long as you made your payments, you're free and clear. There is nowhere that it says that you will live 75 years.
Right.
It might be 10 years. Your book might be a short book. It might be 105. You don't know. And you just have to trust that there's a plan, and we'll understand that plan someday.
And that's one of the things that has helped me so much is understanding having good theology and understanding that God does not promise us how many days we have. He has a specific plan. And in that case, is it hard? Yes. But even though it makes no sense to us, that girl and all the other people we run on, they have lived out the days that God intended them to live out.
Right.
We, again, just like I was this vessel, this tool, whatever you want to call it, to bring the gospel to you. When we run on calls, this helps me so much to realize, I'm going to train and I'm going to try to do the best I can to do, if it's CPR, I'm going to do everything I can in my strength and my power to be ready to bring the best medical care to try to bring that person back. I'm going to try to be the best I can to cut somebody out of a car as quick as I can, or to get into a house and pull them out. All those things. However, if I don't, I understand. If it was within God's plan for them to live, they would have lived. And that is hard for people to understand. Right. But I also know that for me. I know that for my family, for my 3 little kids. I don't know how long I'm going to have them. But I do know that God has a plan. And when we start to frame our mind that way and understand that, it helps so much. It still hurts. It's still hard.
Right.
But it frees us to realize we do the best we can, and we are just a tool in God's plan. And sometimes He uses us to give that person more days, because it wasn't not because they get extra days, but because it wasn't there. He was not done with them yet. Their plan had not lived out yet. Yep. And we just were a part in that story of allowing them to continue to live. And so as we talk about this from my side, again, the things that I see is, so let's go back. When you received Christ as your Savior, you were rescued, as Jason would say, right?
Mr. Sawtell.
Things have not changed necessarily for us. We still meet regularly.
Correct.
And study the Bible together. We try to do it every week. Study the Bible together, walk life together. We do. This is one of the cool things about our podcast. You're going to hear about all the other crazy things we do when we go do stuff together. Right. But what you now know is you're not going to walk this. You're not going to walk through this stuff by yourself. Not too long ago, you had a call with a little one. And, of course, I don't like the word trigger. I don't. But if we're going to use that word, this could be one of those calls, right? All of a sudden, because of what happened before, this could be a size 18, a pair of size 18 boots. It could be.
Right. Yep.
But now you're not trying to do this on your own. In hopelessness, you've got hope. And you also know you've got people. So I think you were still on scene, and I get a text. Right now, let's preface this as you were on scene, not needing to do anything. It wasn't like you were. I want people to know, like, why wasn't he helping? There was nothing you could do at that point.
Correct.
But I got a text. Hey, here's what's going on. Please pray for me. And I remember, I think it was the next day I texted you. In fact, I got a text from your deputy chief saying, pray for, reach out to Rich. He's had a tough call, and I appreciate that. I want that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you hadn't have told me, I would have wanted to know. But you always now will tell me, and I'll pray. And then I followed up the next day. Do you remember your answer?
Not a clue. No.
Your answer was, "It's amazing what a little prayer will do." Oh. And again, it's still a shoe,
mm-hmm.
but the Lord helps us walk through that. It didn't end up being a pair of size 18s that knocked everything out of your closet, but rather.
Because then I was looking at it through different glasses too.
Right.
There was nothing I could do for that infant.
And it wasn't because you failed.
And I did nothing wrong. It was like, that was the plan. There was,
right.
I mean, in that case, there was nothing I could have done to change that outcome. That doesn't mean that I didn't want to. Of course I wanted to. Of course that's not the ending, but that story had already been written by the time I was on scene.
Yep. So we hope you hear, as you are listening, a story of redemption, a story of hope, not of hopelessness. And know that what Rich and I want you to hear out of this is, if you are in that place of walking in hopelessness, in that darkness, or even that place, like you said, it just didn't make sense to keep going on.
Mm-hmm.
If you're there, if you're in any of those places, reach out to somebody. Reach out to, we're not going to be the best help because we're not there. Unless you know us, right?
Right.
Please, but reach out to somebody. You need to, and especially pick up a Bible, start reading, find somebody to study the Bible with, go see your chaplain. I mean, there's a million things. Ultimately, we want you to meet the Lord, because He's gonna change from the inside out, change you from the inside out. But find help, find hope. God has had a plan for you, and no matter how hard you tried to derail that plan, He wasn't going to let you.
Right.
And here we are. We don't know what He's going to do with you from here on out, but He's already doing things with you.
Yep.
So, and maybe this podcast, maybe right now, today, is part of it.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Because
I'm
nervous, so I'd like to hear that some good stuff comes out of this, other than all those podcasts where Jason and you made fun of me or poked little ribs once in a while. Now I can kind of do it back to him.
Well, let me say this. If you appreciated this podcast or just were challenged or encouraged or whatever, if you know me or you know Rich, let us know. If you don't know us, there is a way. One thing I don't like about podcasts is there's, like, on YouTube, there's comments. There's not really a good way to do that here. But I have a Facebook page. It's if you just search on Facebook, Thinking Out Loud with PJ, that'd be a great place to land there. And you could throw some comments out about this and just let us know if God is doing something through this. But thanks for listening. I know this was, we're at 53 minutes. This was 2 episodes in one.
This is kind of how I figured how long they'd be.
But there was no good way to stop this. So hopefully you have enjoyed this. It is time, though, for us to get out of here and come back with another episode next time. But now you know better where we're coming from.
Right. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And hey, here's the cool thing. Now you know Rich's story, and he's not going anywhere. He's going to continue to be a voice in your ear.